Welcome to Leading Minds Revealed, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how today's top leaders harness the power of mindfulness to conquer the fast-paced, ever-changing world of business. In each episode, we sit down with C-suite executives and leaders who share their strategies for navigating rapid change with skill and clarity. Join us as we uncover the transformative mindsets that drive extraordinary leadership. These insights aren't found in business books, and they'll revolutionize the way you lead. And now, here's your host, Michael Apollo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. Today, we're diving into a topic that's on the mind of every leader and every team across every industry. How to lead and not just survive through unprecedented change in the age of AI. In this episode, you'll learn the mindset leaders need to navigate rapid technological disruption, how to empower teams to participate in shaping the future rather than resisting it, and why embracing uncertainty unlocks opportunity. My guest today is someone who lives this every single day. He's the chief financial officer at Georgian, a venture capital firm unlike any other. One where nearly half the organization is composed of AI scientists and machine learning engineers dedicated to helping their portfolio of AI-driven companies solve the world's most complex problems. He brings decades of leadership experience across hedge funds, private equity, and high-growth startups. He has a rare vantage point into how AI is transforming organizations from the inside out. What stood out to me in our conversations was his remarkable clarity and groundedness. He leads with an unwavering mindset of openness, adaptability, and optimism, even when navigating the unknown. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome to the show, Mike Ruthard. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here with you.
I'm really excited to dive in here. And before we do, when we last met, we spoke about this idea that we're in a moment of profound transition, not just technologically, but culturally and organizationally. You said something that, really stood out to me is that change has never scared you. That's how we're working today is not going to be how we're working tomorrow. So let's figure it out together. So I'd love to start there. How do you, when you think about change, how do you define the optimal mindset for leading change today, especially in the age of AI?
Yeah, maybe, I'm gonna cut your question in half a little bit there, Michael. You said, leading through change, but also especially in the kind of the moment of AI that we're living through and will continue to live through. I actually think that the basic lessons and the basic mindset that comes with leading or just living or working through moments of change is not materially different now than it was, maybe at the turn of the century when the internet, or maybe a little before that, but when the internet was changing how we live and how we work. Like the fact that we're on this call together is an example of that. And so I've always just sort of understood, I think, that the change is kind of, it's not only it's inevitable and it's kind of part of how we live and grow and adapt as people, but it's also something that's exciting, and to have, I think you used the word openness there, to have an openness to it is only to find ways to succeed and not to be afraid to bump into corners, not to be afraid to even be vulnerable at saying, like, sometimes, hey, I don't know. Like, I have no problem walking into a team that I work with and saying, we have a problem here, or change is happening and we don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow. But let's kind of put our heads together and find solutions together and find ways to work together. And I think that kind of mentality, certainly in my lived experience, that kind of mentality, it kind of puts people at ease, I think. And I think it puts people in a place where they recognize that we don't all have the answers, but if we have the right kind of mindset and sense of openness, that we're going to find ways to work together and succeed together. And so, yeah, I mean, AI, it's all everybody really talks about these days, I think. Not all, like there's other things going on in the world, but it's the foundational principles of living and working and leading through moments of change. To me, that they are unchanged, So I've just always kind of felt that these are things to be embraced.
I've heard that actually as a common thread through a number of guests who have led, profound change across their organizations, and they share, the advent of the internet, and those who have been around for quite some time. Then you've got cloud computing, and you've got this video conferencing, you've got different platforms, digital platforms, and now AI. That there is, the foundational principles are the same. How we show up is the same. And then there's this other school of thought around, and you're working with a lot of AI organizations, that AI has this, it is different in the sense that there is this exponential growth trajectory where it is sort of this self-learning trajectory. It's evolving rapidly. Is there anything from your perspective that is different that you're noticing with the organizations that Georgian is working with and supporting their growth? And what do you anticipate the impact of that is going to be, if there is one, down the road?
Yeah, I can say what I was having a conversation with a colleague about this morning. Certainly, I would say that the pace is pretty rapid, and there is this actual, I would observe, this bifurcation in the role. So, and you sort of see this with companies that we work with. We have some that are just right on the cutting edge of AI in whatever vertical they exist in, whatever part of the world they exist in. And what you're seeing, though, is that their growth is just off the charts. It's phenomenal. It's, the valuations that they're attracting are kind of, just impressive, let's say. The accountant in me wants to say they don't make sense sometimes, but they do, because people are willing to place that value on them and finance them. But then you also see on the other side of it, the organizations that are maybe a little bit behind the curve, a little bit slower, and that's where the bifurcation is. So you're there. There's definitely some struggles there. There's probably, don't have a crystal ball, going to be some carnage in the next number of years. Some companies that are just left behind, but then you're also going to see the ones that accelerate, just keep accelerating, I imagine. And that's, so yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, it's maybe the pace change is a bit different. And I think there's probably some trepidation that exists too. I mean, I certainly had conversations, read a few papers on this too, about how, we don't really know, and maybe there's some who do, but I think most don't really know exactly what the world's going to look like as far as this goes in the next, 5 to 10 years. But the trepidation probably lives inside those who think, oh no, my job is going to disappear, my profession is going to be disrupted, and that probably will happen. I guess it will happen. I belong to a profession where that is probably near the top of the list of ones that might get disrupted in that sense. But again, just back to that foundational principle piece is, I've never really understood this idea that people get afraid of change and that we should slow it, or we should, unless it's going to be something that's reckless or like nuclear proliferation or something like that. But that we should slow it or cease it, or turn the clock backward. It's just not how the world works. And so those of us who decide that even if my job is disrupted somehow, that there's going to be some other circumstance in which I can live a happy, productive life and build a successful career, to have that kind of mentality that just to find it and be open to it, I think those people will thrive. I really do. The first time we spoke, I mentioned that I was having this conversation with a colleague who is an AI scientist, and he said, I sort of remarked, I said, you know what, I think the accounting profession, it's probably 80% going to get wiped out at some point. He looked at me and he said, mine too. This guy's an AI scientist, right? I said, oh, okay, well, that actually made me feel a bit better, to be honest with you. I thought, like, we're all kind of, feeling our way through this together, and life will change, the world will change. None of us know exactly how, and just, you need to be ready for it.
I have a question around that, the distinction between being change ready, and so just sort of open to what's coming, and then also leading the change, right? Being, change leadership, right? And I think that's a really important distinction right now, because to your point, there's two things that came up for me. One, nobody can really foresee about what the next 5 to 10 years are. I was just watching, on Diary of the CEO, Jeffrey Hinton. He was asked, like, what do you anticipate happening in the next little while? He's like, I have no idea, but maybe we'll have, this artificial super intelligence within the next 5 to 10 years. But it might be 3 years, but it might be longer. And well, what impact is that going to have? Well, I don't know. But if we try to imagine what it is, then everybody should just, our kids should be plumbers, and look to go to the trades. But, when you think about that, like, we don't really know is, I think, a really important way to look at it, because it's not only the uncertainty, it's not only the disruption, but, things may not change. Certain things may not change as drastically as we may think. Change is always happening. That's just the reality of things. But also there may be some different ways that things change that's not what we anticipate it to be. So, for example, I was speaking with a strategist recently, and they were saying that, that a lot of this, the AI LLMs in particular, are actually negatively impacting the strategic direction of a lot of these teams that are innovating new technologies. And it was just an interesting insight that there's just a lot more data, and it's really high quality data and very shiny and very interesting, but it's really tempering, like, how do I use this effectively? And that skill is a very human one. And same deal actually within the accounting profession. One of my guests was they're the chief people officer of an accounting firm that is integrating AI, and they're finding the human aspect of it is that relational piece is just so important, so valuable, and so it may not disrupt the accounting profession. So it's interesting sort of thinking of it that way.
Yeah, no, you make me think of something you said. You were talking to a strategist who remarked that there's so much data now that it's kind of taking people's attentions away from kind of, what's on, what the strategic objectives should be. I don't think that's a new problem. I really don't. Like, I'll give you an example. So I cut my teeth in the 2007, 8, 9 credit crisis, and I sort of, like, I had a front row seat to it. I was working in the hedge fund business at the time, and working in specifically the asset class, structured credit, that kind of almost tilted the world into a second Great Depression. And I remember, though, like, I spent a lot of time thinking and talking about, and we were able to come out the other side in a really good place, but thinking and talking a lot about, what are some of the lessons here? And kind of, I remember at the time I was, we had a risk management committee, which I chaired at the firm. And I thought we did a terrific job, and we actually did all the right things. And we rejected the right kinds of transactions, or that kind of thing. There's it's a bit more nuance in that. But still, the whole world went sideways, and we went sideways with it. And it just struck me, though, and as I looked at other examples, is that there were so many instances, so many red flags that were existed for years before that all happened, that people just ignored because they would look at data sets and switch their minds off. If the data set or the formula didn't say, hey, we're going bankrupt tomorrow, they just sort of carried on as business as usual without applying those kind of critical thinking skills or those lateral thinking skills that are always necessary. And I think, listen, again, don't have a crystal ball, but I think will always be necessary. So, yeah, so that's a challenge, the one that you cite there, that your strategist friend cited as an example. But it doesn't. I think the answer is pretty straightforward. It's we need to, refine our critical thinking skills, and again, that's my idea, but my argument, I suppose, about adaptability and foundational principles. That these things never go away, and if we make sure that we understand that and we train ourselves to behave accordingly, I think most of us are going to come out the other side looking good.
Thinking about that, the 2008 financial crisis, how has sort of leading through that shaped the way that you see the opportunities in the anticipated, like, in today's disruption? It seems like, first off, really stepping back and being able to engage in that lateral thinking, that situational awareness, the ability to take hold, and that real critical thinking, just being able to look through the information and not maybe be fully captivated by certain pieces of data, but actually really taking time to digest what's happening with as much clarity as possible. What are you seeing as some other opportunities in how to sort of lead through this period of time using what you've learned back then?
So, but one of the things that was, pretty clear is I've used this line a number of times since then. Is so we were, I was still relatively early stages of my leadership journey, I guess. But the line I use is absolute worst time to run a structured credit asset manager, and we were effectively a startup at the time, startup structured credit asset manager, but also the best time. Also the best time, right? Because the whole world, like if you kind of had liquidity and you knew kind of what was going on, the whole world was on a half price sale, right? And so that's and I won't sort of stand here and proclaim that I was in that moment the one at our firm that's the loudest voice saying that, but it was pretty clear that was true, and it was a learning that I took with me. And so I don't think, like, I guess we've lived through a pandemic and a few other kind of bumps along the road since then, but we've not had a kind of a market calamity like that since then, or an enduring one anyway. My attitude still is whatever happens, there will be opportunity. There will be opportunity, and it will fall to the people who are prepared, ready, but have that real mindset of wanting to seize it, and maybe take a few risks here and there, but that fortune favors the bold, as they say, right? So that's look, it's easy, and I know it's easy for me to sit here and just say that that it's like people in the if that we talk a lot about there being an AI bubble or not, I don't know. If there is, and it presents itself, and there's this enormous market collapse, I mean, most people will react with great stress, and they'll be worried about their jobs and their homes and all that stuff. That's very natural. So it's easy for me to say that, but I do honestly think that those who are in leadership positions, it's sort of incumbent upon them to identify these kind of these more hopeful elements to it, and kind of lead with a serenity and openness, and whatever the moment calls for, whatever tone it calls for, it's there. It's like we've been. I think about these. We talk about AI as a moment of change, and it obviously it is. But I mean, we've lived through these things before. I mean, and I mentioned just the internet, right? That's one. We go all the way back in the lessons of history. You see, railroads, medical advances, all these different kinds of the printing press, all these things, and these were things that were going to change the way the world works, and it did. But it we kind of evolved, and that's not even doesn't even get into things like war and famine and all these things that have always kind of not always, but they're recurring themes in our history. So I don't, Michael, I don't fret about it. I really don't.
Yeah. The something that struck me as well, and when we've chatted in the past, how a lot of times during times of disruption or great change, there is this threat, this sense of threat that causes people to perhaps freeze in those moments where, from a leadership standpoint, I think it's really important. What I'm hearing right now is to really have this sense of conviction that we're going to get through this and that there is opportunities. Now, how do we keep maintaining our sight line on that? And something as well that I think struck me is that, when you're sharing around your work in really launching this sort of structured credit asset management organization firm at the time, was how you maintained a real solid long-term direction. Like there's everything is changing right now, but find what is enduring, find what is that you can hold on to, that is a longer term play. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that in particular. But before I share that, the one other thing was that making mistakes is part of the journey. And that's one of the ways where you can figure things out as fast as possible. And so, right now, a lot of people say, well, change cycles are speeding up, like you said. much faster pace, right? It almost seems like, it's now shifted to, we'll be planning first is like a 5-year business plan or strategy. Then we're looking at it's coming down to about 3 years. And now it's sort of 1 year prospectus. And now it's like every 3 months. So what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things in there. I was chuckling a little bit. You said, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. I remember, I was the chair of a board of directors of an organization. This is probably 15 years ago. It's probably 15 years ago. And so we decided to go through, or what we decided was kind of in the right cadence of things, to go through a strategic reset or tightening the screws, whatever you want to call it. So we hired a consultant to lead us through that. And he started it by saying, the pace of change is so fast now. Instead of doing like a 5-year plan, we should do a 3-year plan, but distill it down into 1-year increments. And and he was probably right. And I think that's probably what we did. But I mean, it's the same story we're telling ourselves right now. Is kind of my point. And I honestly repeat myself a little bit. I think humans are enormously adaptable if you just believe in yourself. But I think the original part of what you were raising was around, correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood it, but like this idea of leading through moments like this. And I'll just refer back to what I think I said a bit earlier in our conversation is I've always found there to be real currency in presenting yourself as in the right way as vulnerable in a sense, like I use this term a lot. I've used it, I think, already in our conversation. Is I don't have a crystal ball. I really don't. But I do believe that if we're true to our kind of, our objectives and our principles, and kind of true to our, whatever our mission is, we'll see ourselves through it. Which I think attaches to. I mean, you made reference to long-term thinking. I could tell you here at Georgian that is one of our core values, right? It's long-term thinking. That we should always be thinking in, not in this market cycle or that market cycle, but in the long expanse of all the cycles, maybe. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question that well, Michael, but it's very much to me this idea that we share in the journey. It is a journey. It's not kind of like a series of like step-by-step destinations. And I'll confess that I was probably earlier in my life, certainly my professional life, guilty of thinking about the world that way. It's like, okay, I got this job title, and then 2 years I have to get that job title, and 2 years later, the next job title, and kind of on. And by the age of whatever, I have to be in this place. I very much now think of this professional journey as just that, as a journey. I whatever the destination is, and I'm speaking maybe on a personal level now, as opposed to, leadership as well. It touches on it, of course, but is whatever it is if we're kind of have our kind of core principles defined and we're executing on them, that we're going to find our way to a good place.
Yeah, and I'm noticing that more and more how important it is to clarify what are our values, what are our principles, especially during times of great change, and really taking that time to look at like what do we value most? If it's human connection, if it's innovation, if it's learning, if it's growth, if it's well-being, and those values might change, but usually they're quite enduring if you really think about it. That those are our anchors that to get us through whatever challenge it is that we're facing with. And so, what I'm hearing is there's these more of these like timeless principles that really it's important for us just to remind ourselves that, change is something that is happening all the time. Even in this moment, everything is changing. And in that light, and just to ask ourselves, what is the optimal way to show up? And so I'd love to like shift now to Georgian, because, you've shared how it's such a unique firm in the venture capital space, where, nearly half the company is dedicated to solving problems with your portfolio companies and not just investing in them. And so, when you think about like right now and you have such a vast portfolio of AI companies that are growing rapidly, what does it look like from a strategy landscape? What are you noticing as trends in these high growth AI companies, and how they're planning for strategy, how they're anticipating growth, and how they're fostering innovation? I know it's a lot there, but maybe we could unpack that a bit.
Probably two things broadly. One is like a genuine technical expertise, in the kind of technical expertise from like I don't have, like the folks who are really leading the charge in this AI revolution. That they are they are the engineers, they're the scientists, so there's a real appreciation for I said I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe some of these folks do actually. So, but a real appreciation for the where we're moving in a technology sense, and kind of but also where problems need to be solved. Like where the world, there are gaps. So we have a pretty great portfolio of security companies. So like not security companies like the guard at the door kind of security, but your data security and in an AI context. And that is, that is front of mind for everybody, right? Like, I've got all this information that exists on the internet and these AI tools that are launching themselves at it. Like, how do I keep it secure? How do I make sure there's an integrity for what it is I do? So that's the first part of it. Is just the genuine technical expertise. The second is this relentless ambition, like, and it's, I would say, and this is an observation, like a personal one from, I mean, a bit of a distance, but not a long distance, is that ambition attached to, like, again, this idea of the world is going to change, and I'm going to be a leader in that change, and I know what it is going to, what problems need to be solved, and just having that real mindset that I'm going to be the one, or my team is going to be the one, and all the partners I work with are going to be the ones to be at the forefront of it. And that's a pretty, the way I use the term relentless ambition, it's a pretty rare commodity, though, I would say. Like, it's that kind of real entrepreneurial mindset, and the kind of the go see where the finish line is and get there, even though you're going to trip over a few things along the way. And it's a pretty unique mindset. It's a pretty unique person that can do that. But those are the ones broadly, those are the two things that I would observe are into the formula for success. Like we at Georgian, we say to ourselves, we want to invest in we use the term market winners, but companies that are in a market, and they're just going to, so what, like in, McDonald's maybe as a market winner, Coca-Cola or something like that. Obviously we're not investing in companies like that, but having it, but we spend a lot of time thinking, what is a market winner? Like, how do we identify that kind of, if it's going to, maybe it takes 10 years to get to that place, or, some would be faster. How do we identify the characteristics, like maybe at year 2, year 3, not year 10, that will take them to that place? And so we spend a lot of time looking through, like, the data, the numbers, all that stuff. But one of the big things, and so we've got kind of a bit of a, checklist, let's say. But one of the things that is very, very evident is certainly on our radar, is that those characteristics that I talked about, and also the kinds of companies that they attract the best people to. They maybe they're at Silicon Valley, where it's maybe a smaller universe of folks who are all kind of in more or less a similar community, but all the smartest want to work for that company or that company or that company, because they all see that they've got these winning characteristics.
What I'm hearing is this, what you're noticing as some of the success factors in the AI tech, the AI space, and in particular, is this sort of tech expertise, and this as well, this sort of relentless drive for creating some type of impact, positive impact in the world, and to be these market winners, really to dominate the space. And as well, from a leadership perspective, ones that individuals, from a leadership perspective, that embrace some of these elements of openness, vulnerability, drive, and resilience, and optimism, like abounded optimism, these sort of core values. Now, I'm curious, like, when you look at, there's, that ambition to be market winners, the technical expertise, this is something, and then this third component of, what's the DNA of the leader? How do you actually foster that type of mindset within these leaders? Is that something that Georgian supports? Is it? I know you have a relentless focus on teams, right, as well. And so I'm curious, how do you foster those types of dynamics within your own organization and within those that you the support?
So I would say, how do we foster? I don't know that we foster it. I would say we probably try to identify it and then support it. And like I say, that when we go through the process of looking at, the companies we might invest in, this is very much part of the discussion, is what is the pedigree, what is of the founders, of the people who are leading this business, what is their pedigree, what is their mindset, what is all these kinds of characteristics. So in that sense, I'm not sure we're not birthing these people necessarily, but once we're kind of inside the tent, then we're there to support. You mentioned, and this, I don't think we said this earlier, but I've been with Georgian for almost 2 years. Just I think next week actually it'll be 2 years, but very new to, and that's, so I guess 2 years new to the venture capital universe. But one of the things that really attracted me to the firm was exactly what you said, is that roughly half of the firm are people dedicated to helping these folks solve problems, the technical problems. Some of them are different, some of them are business problems, financing problems, maybe sometimes. But it's to then, once we're, a part of their team, I guess, as an investor on their cap table, it's really investing in what they're doing and bringing, our expertise to those conversations. So that's kind of the formula, I would say, in the Georgian context. Like, that is fairly unique in our industry, is that we have this team of experts that go in and they solve problems for companies. It's certainly, it's something that I didn't appreciate this either until a couple of years ago, but some of these market winning companies, it's actually very, very competitive to become an investor in those companies, and to win a seat at the table. Probably one of the differentiators, and certainly one of the differentiators that we've introduced, is exactly this: is that, we're not just going to be a check, we're not just money to you, we're also going to be a partner. We're going to help you make your business better, accelerated, and get to the outcome that you want to get to.
So it seems like, Georgian there's a certain culture that as well is quite attractive for these leading AI companies that you're investing in. And, for other leaders, what do you think they could learn from the type of culture that Georgian is fostering, that they could take to help them build a culture that can embrace sort of rapid technological change?
Yeah, it's so Georgian's, they baked into its DNA is this entrepreneurial spirit. It was founded by three gentlemen who, they didn't come actually from the world of finance. They came from the world of software, and they, they're building companies, exiting companies, and there is this genuine entrepreneurial DNA that exists here. And that can be, you can just sort of, I almost like to say, would observe that it's contagious at times. Like you a lot of things, they come from the top down. But the team thing, though, that is another thing that is very, again, is one of the reasons I wanted to work here. Is this absolute, and then this, I mean, I won't share all the details, but if you just sort of get inside the doors here and you sort of see how people work, how they're compensated, everything, how it all aligns with this idea that, we win together, we lose together, we kind of, we have fun together, do all these things, we do them together, and we kind of, there are no heroes. There are just a lot of people on a team that are hopefully pushing and pulling together. And I don't know what, like, so it's just, I would say it's baked into the sort of what we do, the DNA. Other firms though, like, I don't like, we're not, I've never known us actually to, in any of our portfolio companies, to try and influence the culture. I mean, that's a pretty delicate thing, and every company is going to have its own. It's going to be, if it's a good one, it's probably going to be organic. And it's something that should be nurtured and developed. I'll give you an example. Actually, was when I was joining Georgian, God, I don't know, I went through, probably met about 10 different people along the way. And then at the end of it, I was asked what my impressions were. And the first thing I said is, and I said this to the three gentlemen who founded the firm, it strikes me that you've got a very carefully curated culture that's very, very team driven. And they all kind of nodded simultaneously. And which made me feel good, because I guess I got the answer right to the question. But it did strike me that this is, and I know this to be true now because I've been here for a while. It's something that they have always talked about, and they have always tried to live through example. And I think it becomes contagious, as I say. So.
I'm a big fan of Ray Dalio's principles. This is success principles, and something that's struck me in our conversations is, how simple and I would say elegant it could be boiled down to some very basic principles, that it doesn't have to be some really contrived, complex formula to craft a culture. But so, for example, here, just really having that really entrepreneurial spirit, that drive to succeed, and in addition to that, this sense of camaraderie, this sense of creating a culture, an environment, operational structures that really can help the organization succeed together, and just know when that's happening, knowing when you're moving through the challenging times together, and to be able to reinforce that continuously so that you also have the good times together, right? And it's interesting that a lot of the research done out of Project Aristotle, out of Google's high-performing teams and NASA's high-performing team studies of how high-performing teams function and how they're structured. It's interesting. A lot of the skills and the capacities that they speak about there are about this ability to have an understanding of each other outside of work, the ability to maintain a sense of commitment to what you're going to complete, and completing that together, knowing that there's a common direction, what that direction is. All of these core facets are such an important aspect of really high-performing teams.
You started by talking about Ray Dalio. You might not believe me, but the thing I have right in front of me is Ray Dalio's look backward at 2025. So yeah, and so I joke around here sometimes. I'm a pretty avid reader. So I joke, okay, we're gonna have I'll read it like you do in university classes. A reading list is a required reading list, and so there are basically three names on it for me. One of them is Ray Dalio. So I share that. One of the other two are Howard Marks and Nassim Taleb. So every time one of these memos comes around or one of the papers comes around, I blast it out to the team. I said, drop everything, we're reading this, because these guys have studied history and they know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another key thing too about, you may not have a crystal ball, but I think one of the biggest insights is that you can anticipate the future by really understanding the past. And I think that that's such an important thing. One thing I want to loop back to before, I just sort of explore a little bit about, I know, how the impact that your parents had within you and in building this sort of interesting mindset that you have to embrace change. I want to just sort of link it back. We were talking about how there's this idea of being change ready, open to what's about to come. And there's this idea right now, I think a lot of the big consulting firms are talking about it, that we need to lead the change, right? And from your perspective, what does like effective change leadership look like for you?
Yeah, I would say the business that we're in, the Georgian is in, the work that we do, we are part of the kind of the leading of change. We are part of it. We don't preach about it though. Like if you come to our meetings, like our investment committee meetings or our executive team meetings, that we don't really kind of we just kind of do it, to be honest with you, which is one of the things that I really like about this. So, yeah, I mean, consulting firms, that they're always putting out these white papers that say you've got to lead this or do that, or, whatever, the kind of the 4-point list of how to deal with change, or whatever else is the topic du jour. Not to diminish the consulting firms, that's not a great, they're all good, but honestly, I just think, and I've said this probably 3 or 4 times, and we made reference to the Ray Dalio and the other writers I mentioned, like there are principles at play here. They're foundational first principles. And if they're understood and observed, then the change will just naturally be kind of something that is okay with you, So I guess that's a lot of words to say. It's so yeah, maybe you lead it through example. I don't know, you lead it through participation, but I don't look at this as something as like we're going to get through. Maybe I'll just simplify this in a way that's not real, but like just say in 10 years from now, everything has changed. Like all the AI it's cooked and we know what it's doing to us. And there's not going to be somebody who's standing on top and saying, I was the leader of all that change. Like there's not, it's going to be a very organic thing that's going to, ebb and flow. And there will be a few people for sure. I mean, we can, cite kind of the big names in the game right now, but I can promise you this, there will also be some big names that we haven't heard of right now either. Right. So, so if your question is, how do we lead the change? I mean, I would not actually respond with kind of, there's a roadmap or a formula for this. There's just kind of an understanding of what's happening, willingness to be a part of it, and to find the moments that are important for your organization, for you personally, whatever it is.
It was interesting. You opened it up by almost sharing that, like it's moving from openness to actually modeling what it looks like to actually lead through it. And so it's almost like an embodied moving from an openness, but actually just embracing it as you go. And that's sort of what comes up for me from hearing from what you're sharing there, and that it's just going to happen. And it's about being in it while it's happening in a skillful way as possible. And I think that's a unique time that we're in right now. And, I know your parents they grew up in difficult circumstances, yet, something you shared that despite everything, they never complained, and I sort of get that from you. You're like, well, yeah, it's happening. It's happened and it's going to keep on happening. So let's just keep moving forward. How did their resilience and work ethic shape you in the way that you are now?
Yeah, it was very much like it just live by example. It's kind of lead by example. Maybe I don't know, like because kind of the home that I was brought up in. So as you mentioned, both of my parents grew up in very different ways, but in very, very difficult circumstances. And that I wouldn't say the same about me. Like I kind of grew up in maybe a small town, middle class type environment, but notwithstanding anything that ever had happened to them, and there were some pretty difficult things that happened to each of them before they were married to each other. They never complained about anything, never ever complained about anything, and that was just something that I don't even know that if you would ask, the 12 or 14-year-old version of me, if that's, kind of an example, I don't know if I would have been able to answer the question, but these things they endure, they live with you, because even though a 12 or 14-year-old me was probably pretty obtuse, you still watch and learn, right? And as you get older, you kind of take these lessons in a bit more seriously, and you reflect and you understand where they've come from. And that was just it. Now I don't know. I mean, they were both wired that way, again, for different reasons, but it's just something that it always endured for me. And neither of them would ever preach. I mean, they tell me to do my homework and stuff like that, but they would never, kind of preach the right from the wrong or anything like that. They would just do it and trust their kids to see it.
As we near the tail end of our time together, when for our listeners, if there's a leader that's listening in, and they're enraptured in this potential of a future reality, and there's some anxiety arising around it, and they aspire to build a culture ready to embrace this the pace of change that's happening right now. Again, it's not different change, but again, just this pace of change. What would you say would be, what advice you would give them on where they should begin, or at least how to sort of show up in this near time, and as they move through this next 3 months to the next rest of the year?
Yeah, that's a short amount of time. But look, I would say I'd probably repeat myself a little bit here. I've always felt that kind of the right way to go about these things is to build the right relationships, trust-based relationships. It takes a bit of time. It takes some commitment to do it, but when you get there, it can be a pretty powerful thing. You framed it in the context of being a leader. Again, I'll just repeat again what I think I said twice now is I would never be afraid to be vulnerable in the right way. I'm not talking about, being, subject to emotional breakdowns or anything like that, but just to recognize that there are answers, but they're answers to questions, and you might not have those answers, and let's all figure it out and find it out together. And empowering people, like just to say that, in which is they're very related, these two concepts, I think. But hey, let's kind of, you take a leadership role, and I do try to do this, and kind of the day to day is, okay, we've got some kind of a new problem that's introduced itself, and say, hey, this is your opportunity to go and solve it. And if you're spinning your wheels, or if things are going sideways for you, or if you're feeling that anxiety that you talk about, or stress, that just doubling back to the trust thing, trust me to come and talk to me, and know that it won't be a conversation leading with judgment. It'll be a conversation that is very focused on getting us to the outcomes that we all want to get to. So it's very esoteric things, I know, but I do think that it's certainly, in my experience, they've been useful and powerful things to observe.
I really appreciate that. And so finally, where could our audience learn more about Georgian and the work you're doing?
Oh, I guess probably just on our website. We don't sort of get out there, and we do have a marketing team, but we don't get out there kind of in the broader universe that materially. But that would be the best place, I think. Yeah. So we kind of live in a unique part of the world.
Definitely. And I know I connected with you on LinkedIn. You mentioned that's somewhere that others can follow a bit of some of your work as well. We'll make sure to include that into the description there. Mike, thank you so much. I think it's sort of like a timeless wisdom is that I'm going to really take away. And I think those listening in right now during this time of like just so much change and disruption and transformation happening around the pace of it, that really returning back to just these solid principles of vulnerability, of being able to work collaboratively with others, and to really maintain an open and sort of optimistic viewpoint on what opportunities are on the sightlines for us on an ongoing basis, and how valuable that could be during this time of great change, I think is something that I'm going to take away. And I know a lot of our listeners will too. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Michael. This has been great. Really enjoyed it.
Well, and I did too. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us here on another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. I will see you on the next one.
Leading Minds Revealed podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.